everyone. This is Lynn Smargis of Write For You. I'm a ghostwriter, book editor, and publisher that I help busy professionals self-publish their book. Today, I'm here with an amazing guest. It is not my cat Hemingway you are seeing here next to me, and we're going to talk about her in just a second. I'm super excited to have her on today. But before we dive into today's content, I wanted to share a story that illustrates how my publishing services work for clients. So I recently, one of my clients, his name is Alex, and I worked with him on book editing, and he wrote me an awesome review that says, oh my gosh, her book editing services were amazing. She's extremely easy to work with. She gets her part done quickly, and I love the ideas she brought to the table. I'll definitely be using her services again in the future. And Alex is not only an awesome client, he's going to be a future guest. So Alex Trumbull, thank you for writing that amazing review for my services. And like many of you, Alex had valuable expertise to share, but he struggled in how to express it. And so when I helped him editing his book, I could get his book done while he was managing his demanding business. So after working together, I had his book edited and then he was publishing it. So now he's got 4 books published, 2 of which I helped edit it. And I was really happy to help him with that. So if you're looking to fast track your publishing book, your self-published book, let's navigate the writing and publishing landscape together so you can share your expertise to a wider audience, just like Alex, who expanded his impact and reach. So make sure to grab that discovery call, which is linked in the show notes below. All right, so let's jump into today's episode. We've got a fabulous episode today. I am going to be interviewing an awesome friend and colleague. Her name is Virginia, and Virginia, let me put her in the stage here. Virginia is, after she had personal finance podcasts help her get her out of debt and learn how to invest, she became inspired to provide financial coaching to help others with the same process. And so she launched her own podcast in 2019 and was approached by some financial advisors to launch their podcast. Soon she was editing more financial podcasts, and she was a personal finance coach. And then she leaned into the podcast production business full time, since that's where she organically was going with her services. So, and if you're interested in writing a book, podcasting is also another great way to market your business. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So Virginia, welcome to Publishing for Professionals.
Thank you, Lynn, for having me. I'm really excited to talk about how podcasting and writing go together.
Oh, podcasting and writing go together so well. And yes, and we're definitely going to jump on that bandwagon today. So before we start jumping into how a podcast can assist you in with your marketing, your book and things like that, tell us a little bit about the financial space you're in and how you got into that. Because I gave a little basic introduction, but what made you really pivot from coaching into the podcasting space besides just getting a lot of clients? What is it that you love about podcasting?
Yeah. So the big thing that attracted me to podcasting in general was through personal experience is I noticed that when I would listen to someone consistently in my ears day after day or week after week, even when I did work corporate, driving back and forth to work, I felt like they were my friend, confidant, partner, buddy, advisor, right? And you hear someone speak as an expert on their topic time and time again, and you start applying the little things that they're telling you, or, conceptually just thinking about wow, I haven't thought about that before. That's such a good idea, and you start to just really trust them. And so when you flip that and you look at, wow, as a business owner, I can help break down barriers and allow people to trust me just by speaking. I mean, that is just such a powerful place to be in as a business owner. And so I really saw the power of, through trust building exercises, right? Just through speaking, interviews, sharing your knowledge, you would very organically be able to attract people into your business, whether it's collaborators, partners, clients, whatever it is that you're seeking. I felt like that was such an amazing, powerful tool for business. And, I have an accounting background, so business finance is totally my jam. But then the personal finance piece was like a personal journey for me. And so anybody now that talks about money in any way, which if you think about it, is most business owners,
Right?
everybody's service touches on money somewhere. And so, yeah, I just want to help people get their voice out there and establish that trust.
I love it. Yeah, I found that because I have personally produced 4 of my own podcasts, and then most of my podcast production has been on the writing end. So I used to help people write show notes and blogs and things
Mhm.
like that, which I don't anymore. But one of the things I love about podcasting, I 110% agree with you, is like the personal connection. Like there's no other medium that you can get that has more. Like I feel like almost for my personal take, and audio has more of a personal connection than the video a lot of times for me, because I'm just sitting and listening to them. I'm not forming, like I'm forming a picture in my head, but I'm not looking at an image. So I feel like the audio for me has a more emotional connection than even the video. But like nowadays, I feel like it's really important to do both video and audio, although a lot of people are pushing back on doing the video piece, but it's become such an integral part of podcasting lately. Can you touch a little bit on about that, about why it's really important to do like your video and the audio piece for the podcasting?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, video podcasting and even just that term really sprang to the surface post COVID. So 2021, 2022, and it's just accelerated since then. And there, of course, is pushback against video podcasting. For women, especially, it's like, oh, my hair, my makeup, my background. There's so many additional concerns to worry about and that can cost money actually, just as far as like your studio, what it looks like, your room, the way it is or isn't soundproofed. And when we just talk about podcasting, so just your voice and your mic, you can record in the dark, you can record at night, you can record in a closet, you can record on the go. There's so many more options and less judgment because there is that visual component that's missing. But like you said, because that visual component is missing and you're able to listen to a voice only podcast, you're able to actually immerse yourself in the content a little bit more so than when you have the visual element, because that visual element allows judgment. So that's the piece that's going on there. But it is so important, even if you aren't publishing the full video, let's say on YouTube or Spotify or Apple, which by the way, those platforms do accept video. Some people didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah.
Apple does video? Heck
Apple
yeah.
does video. Yep.
Okay.
So a little tip there, but uh and it's so important to just record that video because then you can use clips for social media. I mean, social media is kind of like the biggest reason you would record video, even if you didn't want to publish the full length episodes. So there's a lot to unpack there, and it is a personal, unique decision whether you do want to record video or not. It is definitely not a must in the industry. And there are barriers to it. Adding video to your production introduces a whole slew of different variables. So if someone is already feeling overwhelmed with just business and life and maybe aging parents or young kids or whatever's going on, and you just published your book and you're thinking like, now I got to do podcasting, that's where we have a full conversation about what will work for you at this stage in your life, and you can always add or subtract or maneuver at a different date down the road. So for those people that may be hearing this and think, yeah, now I got to get on video. Well, no, but let's talk through your individual situation, and maybe just audio is the place to start.
Yeah. And another thing I know people have done is they do the audio and then they just make like still background images
Mhm,
for the video, and you can do
mhm.
that. Or another thing people have done too is they record their podcast in audio and then they just get on like their iPhone or whatever after that and they're like, "Oh, I just had this awesome interview with Virginia, blah blah blah. Come check it out." So that they can have a video piece, but it doesn't have to be like a whole interview, which is really great. So, Virginia, for people who are looking just to start, there is a lot because you and I have been in this podcasting space for a long time. So we have seen like the evolution of podcasting. And so there is a lot of really bad information about podcasting out there. And so one of the things I often hear is like you have to buy expensive mics. You have to have like a padded room. Like neither of us are in padded rooms right now. Actually, the room I'm in is has glass on both sides, which I do probably need to put something on. But what are the basics for people who are listening to this? They're like, okay, I want to start a podcast, but I've heard you have to buy expensive mics, you have to have a whole room, blah, blah, blah. So
Mm.
give us like the basic
Mhm.
411 on what people absolutely have to start a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So, number one recommendation is not to buy an expensive mic. And the mic that, for whatever reason, was highly marketed to most entrepreneurs within the past few years is a Blue
Blue
Yeti.
Yeti.
Do not buy one. Those are a studio microphone and they absorb every sound in the room. And to the untrained ear, you're thinking, well, my room's quiet. What are you talking about? No, no, it's not. There's a lot of air movement. You even just moving your arms, even if you're not touching anything, like there is sound to
Ceiling
every little,
fans.
yeah, ceiling
I
fans,
can't tell you how many
everything.
people I've talked to that said ceiling fans. They had no idea how much their ceiling fans noise made.
Yes. So don't buy a Blue Yeti. They're expensive anyways. So,
And what is a Blue Yeti specifically for? Because I have heard lots of different things, but Blue
yeah,
Yetis are really good for
in studio. If you are in a sound treated room, no additional sounds outside, right? Like the lawn crew is not here. My room has tons of fabric in it and is basically echo proof. Is what we're going to just in layman's terms, right? So, yes, studio microphone. So, what you need actually is a dynamic microphone, which is like this one right here in front of me. It's about $60. It's a Samsung Q2U. It is on the lower end of the price range, and it's a great microphone. It can take you years into the future before you need to upgrade. So, microphone, number one, dynamic. Um, you can do simple little things in your space, like even just in my office that I'm in, I've got curtains on the windows, which, okay, yeah, like that's like a normal thing in decor, right? And you could even get like a towel or a fuzzy blanket and just lay it on the desk in front of you just to keep your sound from your mouth from bouncing off of this hard surface back up. But on top of that, most software these days, when you go in to edit your podcast, has a de-reverb function. Um, there are settings and things like that that you would need to learn because you don't want to do that too strong, but you can get some reverb out of your sound. Back to equipment, though, we're always going to recommend Lynn's wearing headphones. I've got earbuds in. Anytime you're doing an interview or that you would have any sound playing from your devices, you want to be hearing that in your ears, not out loud, because that will also be absorbed in your microphone. So, basic microphone, earbuds or headphones, and a as quiet as possible space.
Yep. And you just need either a computer or I know some people record on their phones or their iPads, which you
Mhm.
can do, but it's much easier to record on a laptop or like a desktop computer, because then you have like a lot of the recording platforms don't work on tablets or things like that. So just
Yeah.
having just your basic computer, like you don't have to get anything fancy is really
Yeah.
a good investment to make a good choice if you don't have one already. So
Well,
that
and on that, I didn't mention, but this microphone specifically has a USB option, so it does plug into a computer. You'll get, once you start shopping for microphones, you'll see, the different options out there. You do not need the, fancy cord that goes to a receiver device that then plugs in through something else that then goes into your like no, 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 no. Get a USB microphone, keep it simple and start easily, right? Like reduce the barriers.
Yes, I've got 2 USB microphones. I've got an ATR 20, I think it says
Mhm.
a 2100 2200 or whatever, and
Great mic.
then I also have a Rode USB, which I absolutely love, and they do, like you said, great sound quality, you don't have to worry about it, and yeah, no, it's fabulous, I love them
Yeah.
both,
Those are
and
both
then
great
yeah,
recommendations.
they're really good. All right, so we're gonna take a short break right here, my friends. We come back, we're gonna talk more to Virginia about podcasting and how it can increase your business and help your book sales. Okay, we're back with Virginia from Podcast Abundance. So, the first half, we talked about some basic podcast information, but the second half, we're going to talk about specifically how Virginia helps her clients with podcasting and how that helps boost their business. So, Virginia, you work mostly with financial investment vertical, but you can obviously do podcast editing for any vertical.
Mhm.
But what are some of the aspects, like, first of all, let me ask you this: what are some of the more like, obviously people are posting their podcast usually every week, but besides just posting your podcast and creating your podcast, what are some other, like, I guess, things you can do with a podcast that you've noticed that worked really well for your clients in promoting their business or their book?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the number one thing is to make sure that your podcast is highlighted on your website. Whether you do that through a tab and you have a whole page dedicated to your show, or it's just a blurb at like the middle of your homepage, but your podcast should be on your website. I've run into so many professionals that maybe they're frustrated, they don't think they're getting traction or something like that. And I'll look and I'm like, no one knows you have a podcast. Like, we need to fix that. So, just creating the thing doesn't create the glow up that you want. You have to put it everywhere. So, of course, social media is a thing, having it on your website is a thing. And then the other big, um, you know, growth creating option is to actually guest on other people's shows. So there I refer to it as inner podcast networking. Have people on your show even if it's just for a short like 5-minute blip if you don't want to do like the full interview thing, but to have people on your show and also for you to be on other people's shows. I find that the individuals who create a what we call solo podcast, and it's just a monologue, it's you teaching, talking, maybe you highlight a chapter of your book here and there, something like that. That's awesome. But if you are only creating episodes where it's just you all the time, yes, you are creating authority and you're getting content out, but there's no networking happening within the podcasting space. And so that can actually not allow you to grow because, again, no one knows your show exists. It's just you speaking out. It's kind of the equivalent of if you were on Facebook and you just post all the time, but you never scroll and make comments on anybody else's stuff. The algorithm isn't going to show your posts to your friends. Like, that's just how this online stuff works. So just think of it like that. Like, you've got a network within the podcasting space as well as creating your content, which every time you're on someone else's show, like I'm on Lynn's show right now, I'm going to share this episode as a guest. And so that's where that networking and shareability comes into play, is that your guests are sharing, you're sharing that you had a guest on, like there's all these conversations that are happening behind the scenes. So, two really important things: website and guesting.
Yeah, for sure. And I know you and I both have know Alex DeSanfilippo
Mhm.
Podmatch, and I always recommend people like. And it's funny because I think I've gotten some credits on Podmatch because I always have people emailing me being like, "Oh, I want to be so and so wants to be a guest on your podcast." That's like from some agency, and I'm like, "Oh, if you haven't figured out Podmatch, like check it out." because
Mhm.
I'm like, I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, and
So,
Podmatch is very affordable too.
yeah.
So, whether you sign up yourself and you're, finding matches for you to guest or for guests to be on your show through that platform yourself, or you have an admin do it or something like that, like, it's a great platform.
Yeah, for sure. And so for marketing, like when someone's doing a podcast, when you're like consulting them or advising them,
Mhm.
Virginia, what are some of the biggest, I guess, like challenges people have when they are maybe not just marketing their podcast, but like figuring out like what they want to do with their podcast and maybe how they should not just market their podcast, but more of like how they should market their business on their
Mhm.
podcast.
Yeah. So the biggest conversation I have, it's like an ongoing thing throughout launch and even months and months into producing someone's show is what is the true goal for this, right? Do you want to sell your services? Do you want to sell your book? Do you want to, build your email list? Like, what is the actual individual singular goal for your show? You can't have multiple goals. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. You get one. And yes, that one can create traction in other areas because, everything is connected, but you've got to have a single goal. So identifying and staying focused on that goal is really challenging for everyone. Someone can come to me and say, okay, well, I want to sell my services. And then we get down the road a little bit and they, throw a call to action in there that's like, sign up for this thing or, buy my book or meet me at this event or whatever. And we have to dial it back and say, okay, are we getting distracted? Like, are we focused on people attending this thing or are we still focused on selling your services? Like, what is the singular goal? Because then that affects your call to action, how things are written in the show notes and your titles and all of that, and how often and how we do your call to action, whether you have a commercial, whether you're just speaking it, whether um, the guests that you bring onto your show have to do with that service or that event or whatever it is. So there's a lot of strategy behind the scenes based on what your singular goal is. It's so easy to get distracted by listener numbers or subscriber count or all of these tangential numbers in the
Right. All these
podcasting or
tangential
social media.
data points.
Yes. So identifying your goal and staying true to that over the long term is going to be really, really important and
Yeah.
challenging. But it's challenging for everyone. So you're not alone.
And I think one of the things people don't realize, especially if they have not done any marketing or advertising, or they haven't done it consistently, is that you really need to put something out for at least 3 months, like the
Mm.
same thing over and over
Mhm.
and over again. Like you can't put it out for a week and be like, oh, well, nobody called. And
Yeah.
then say it didn't work because you don't know what part of that didn't work. So you really have to try it out for a period of time. And then obviously, if it's not working, you can always switch. But I want you to talk a little bit about like the difference between having a solo show and a interview show. And
Mhm.
so one of the things I had talked about with one of my book clients is he has a podcast show and he wants to be seen as the expert, but he does all interviews. And I told him like, you can't be seen as the expert if you're doing all interviews. So could you go into explaining a little bit about that, Virginia?
Yeah. Okay. Great point and question here. The goal behind your show determines the show style, the sequence, the cadence, the frequency, all of these things, all these variables. And this is something that I talk through and work through during the launch of any of my client shows. So, when you are wanting to be seen as the expert and you want to elevate your authority and you want to get your name and brand out there, which it sounds selfish, but honestly, it's most of our goal with our business. We are the business owner. That's how we're going to get traction and make sales. You need some solo episodes somewhere, right? And typically, I recommend a ratio of 1 to 3. So every third or fourth, we can, vary that a little bit. every third or fourth episode needs to be a solo show. So for my podcast, for example, which it's not the Bible, but it's just an example, I do 3 interviews and then I do a solo show. And it's worked out to where about once a year I do a mini series that is me, all month long, every single week. So, you get to learn about a very specific topic on a deep level, throughout the month of July, for example. So you need to craft the show to where you are the one being seen as the expert, to where you're teaching and talking and not always highlighting someone else's expertise. So when you're doing an interview, that's kind of what Lynn is getting at with this particular client. When you interview someone, you're highlighting their expertise and you're bringing them on as your guest, right? Like as the expert to talk about this specific topic. Like I'm here talking today about podcast production. So thanks to Lynn, I get to be your expert for the day. But, when Lynn does her solo episodes, that's where she gets to talk about ghostwriting and she's highlighting herself as the expert for her brand. So there is a very different strategy based on who you're having on, why you're having them on, and how often or not that you do solo episodes. It's super important to go back to the goals there and think about, all right, well, how am I being highlighted as the expert? Am I?
Right.
Maybe not.
And the other thing I always tell people too is you don't want to have a guest on that does the same exact service you do. Like you want someone that's
Mm,
complementary to what you
mhm,
do because
mhm.
you don't want to highlight someone else as the expert and then doing the same thing that you do, right? And so I really like use you can use guesting strategically because if you want to reach out and connect with somebody that you haven't connected with and they have a complementary service and you could refer each other services, that's a great time to like get on LinkedIn and connect with them and message them and say, hey, I've been following you on LinkedIn. I really love your article about blah, blah, blah. I have this podcast. Would you be interested in coming on my podcast as a featured guest to be interviewed? And that's a great way to strategically expand your network using podcasting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say even if someone does your same services, I would be very strategic about, let's say, maybe you're going to share the stage at an event. And so it is this full on planned out collaborative effort. And maybe you're on their show, you're there on your show, you're sharing the stage together, and your goal is to get both of your audiences and more so that you both get business. It has to be a very strategic, very abundant mindset when you go into that. It can be done, but for the most part, yes, your guests need to be ideal clients, past clients, collaborators. Like Lynn said, somebody that offers a what I like to say it's like parallel service to you. Like if they buy your thing, they would also like this other thing.
Yeah.
So lots of options and ideas there.
Yeah. So let's talk. I want to also touch briefly on live videos because some
Mm,
people do their podcast live. Some people like I do all mine recorded. If I do a live, it's usually just like a workshop or a webinar or something.
mhm.
So what's the difference between doing your show live? Obviously, it's live, right? But like, what are some things that people want to consider? Because you don't have to do live shows for your podcast because some
Right.
people think that you have to because they see people do it. But if
Okay.
people do consider doing a live, what are some of the considerations they want to know about that are much different than doing a pre-recorded?
Yeah, yeah. So the big thing that's important in the podcasting space is what many people will say is consistency. So whatever you're committing to, and if you're committing to a live, that means you're going to be there every Monday at 10 a.m. So what happens on a holiday? What happens when your kids are out of school? What happens when you go on vacation? Like, are you going to be able to commit to that time and date month after month, year after year? Highly likely not. So that's something huge to consider right there. What I like to speak about in the podcasting space is not consistency, is sustainability for yourself, for your schedule, for your lifestyle, for your health needs. Um, you can record your episodes weeks in advance, months in advance. If you're not doing video at night or on the weekend, like whenever, it's super flexible because then you control when those episodes are pushed out to your audience and they can be dropped on, Monday at 10 a.m. week after week, even if you're on vacation or your kids are out of school or you're sick or whatever. So building in that sustainability factor for yourself and your business when you want to do live episodes is a huge consideration because, yeah, I mean, things happen in life and you may
Yeah.
not be able to be live one week and you don't want your audience to fall off just because you missed a week or two.
Right.
Another thing, of course, for live, which seems obvious, but there are no edits. So if you sneeze or cough or your dog starts barking or whatever, you don't get the opportunity to edit that out. And it just depends on your brand, right? If you have a brand that you want to exhibit as being really professional and well produced, then a live show is maybe not the option you want to go with. But if you're just like, I am who I am, what happens, it's all out here, I have nothing to hide, then okay, go live. I mean, see what happens.
And then another thing you always have to consider with live too is that if you invite a guest on to live and for
Mm.
whatever reason they don't show, and I've heard of guests like not showing and not even telling the
Oh,
podcast host that they're not showing, right? You have to always have a backup topic. So if your guest doesn't show, you can start talking about your own topic
mhm.
and do your own show solo. Or another option I know is more recent option, like in the past couple of years, is you can record your thing ahead of time, your episode, and then post it as a live, but then you still want to be there at that time to answer any questions that come up in the comments.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And while you're speaking, my mind is going toward how to even use your podcast to get on additional stages and to get your book out there. So maybe you want to lead me that way. And
Yeah,
does
for
that come
sure.
up for some of your clients? Like, do they want to get on stage or how does that work for
Absolutely.
you?
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about that. So yeah, go for it. So like when people want to get on stage and they want to promote their book, like like give us some of your information that you share or advice, professional advice you share with your clients.
Yeah, well, thank you. But I'm thinking about, you know, as a podcaster, you have this amazing platform that you can take clips from and send it to event organizers to be able to get yourself booked on stage.
Great
It's
idea.
it's kind of like street cred to be able to say like, hey, I want to speak about this topic, and you fill out their application, but then, oh, hey, here's my platform where I speak all the time, so they can see or hear how you are, whether you cuss or not. Like there's just different things that they may or may not be looking for. And so that's a great way to show that you are comfortable speaking behind the mic and that you would be great on stage. And that on stage opportunity might be that you can sell your books from stage, or it might be more subtle that present your expertise and you just have a little blurb at the end that's like, here's a QR code, or here's, join my email list and I'll tell you more about my book or something like that. But that's a great way podcasting is a great way to establish your speaking presence and even just get practice. I've had clients who have been using podcasting as their practice for getting on the news and getting on live TV, right? So it's kind of like studio training for when you are being interviewed for a news spot or whatever, depending on your topic. Of course, sometimes something happens in the world and your book is the perfect thing for people at that time. That's a great opportunity to be able to get booked on CBS News or whatever and to speak about your topic. And if you have a podcast, then they know that you're used to being behind the mic.
Nice. I never even thought of any of those. Those are all really great suggestions. Oh my gosh. So Virginia, this has been amazing. So do you have any other like tips or advice for people before we wrap up that are thinking about like they might be listening to this and be like, I'm thinking about doing a podcast, but I'm not sure, like, and they don't know if they want to pull the trigger or not. Like, what advice do you have for people to know that they're ready to do a podcast?
Yeah. Well, first, and I might get some eye rolls, but most of the time, anyone that I interview, whether they're 300 episodes in or 10, they say that they wish they started sooner. There is always going to be a learning curve with any new project you take on. There was a learning curve when you started to write your book. So, expect it again when you're podcasting, but people always wish that they started sooner. And your first few episodes, you're going to be proud of them at the moment. They're going to sound amazing, especially if you have a professional production company working on your show. But it's no fail. You're going to get 50 episodes down the road and you're going to listen back to episode 1 and you're going to be like, "Oh my gosh, what was that?" Like it's not going to be your best work. Your best work comes with experience. So get started even if you maybe think that you're not ready. Ditch the video, just start with audio, just start getting your reps in so that you can get practice and you can get good at this. The other piece that I will offer is the planning is the most important part. However, don't get stuck planning and thinking about the concept of your show for months and months and months. It should be, a week, maybe, a couple phone calls with a professional if you need. And actually, there's a workbook I have that will help with that. It's literally called a launch workbook and it walks you through all the planning steps. Of course, if we do a launch together, I'll take you even deeper, but this is the surface level, fill out the workbook and get your concept down and get started. So that is the podcast launch workbook on my site. It's under the resources section, and it's a free download. So I'm just going to encourage people to go there.
Awesome. And I have seen that because I've downloaded it. It's a fabulous podcast launch workbook. So I will put that link in the show notes below. And so people can access that. Well, Virginia, this has been so awesome. I know my guests have gotten a lot of really great information from this. And I totally agree with you 110%. Like you just need to start because when you look back, of course, it's not going to be as good and it shouldn't, right? Like you should be growing and doing better as you go along. Like this actual podcast that we're doing right now has already been rebranded once and it only has this is episode 26. So yeah, so I mean I have changed the name, I've changed the look, I've changed the colors on it, but I thought I was going to start out with something different, but ended up going with something, it's the same vertical but like wanted to change the name and the look of it and it ended up being great. But if I hadn't started, I wouldn't have known what to change because I got feedback from people. So
Nope.
absolutely, really some really good points here today. I love it. So when people want to reach out to you, Virginia, what
Mhm.
is a good way? So if you're on YouTube, you can see this scrolling across the bottom, her website. What is a good way for people to reach out to you, to connect with you and get to work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can check me out at podcastabundance.com. There are buttons to book a call there on the website, but if you just want to go straight to the booking link, you can go to talktovirginia.com. And Virginia is spelled Virginia, like
Just
the
like the
state.
state.
Yes. You would be shocked how many people spell that name wrong. So,
It wouldn't
but
surprise
yes.
me. I correct people's grammar all day long.
That's right. That's right. That's what you do. But yeah, either podcastabundance.com or talktovirginia.com. And your initial calls are always free. And I just love to help people get their word out. So happy to talk
Awesome.
to you.
And then they can also tune into your podcast, which is
Yes. Yes. Podcasting for financial professionals. And, of course, my vertical is the financial space, but you'll get some good advice there because everybody I'm talking to is a business owner, maybe not an author. I bet a lot of them are aspiring authors, which is why Lynn has also been on my show. But yeah, you'll get some good advice about podcasting on that show.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, my friend Virginia, this has been great having you on. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being here today. And my friends, I just wanted to remind you that if you love listening to this episode with Virginia, which I'm sure you did, please make sure to rate and review the Publishing for Professionals podcast on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this on your audio player. And until next week, this is Lynn Aliquity Smargis reminding you to keep writing, keep dreaming, and keep creating because your book is waiting to be born.